This is Tom Edmondson for meaningandministry.com, and I'm delighted to have a third podcast interview with Dr. Anna Niiles-Maki, all the way from Finland. It's a little after 3 p.m. where you are, and it's a little after 8 a.m. here. And today our topic is the work of a Finnish philosopher, Lauri Rauhala. And I know I didn't say that in the best way, but hopefully that was good enough.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let you do all the talking, and I will try to sound smart from time to time. I would like to say, when you pull up your slides, I'd like to tell our viewers to make sure and copy down your website address and go to your website. And because you have a section that is completely in English, and you have two books that are available there. One, which is, I think it is your diplomate project, if I remember correctly.
You mean English books?
The two books in English. Forgive me. Yes.
Yeah. None of them are
Okay. The
my diplomate.
Introduction to Logo Philosophy is the first
Yeah.
book. Very
Yes.
nicely written, very intelligently written. And then the second one is the Handbook for Logotherapists.
Yeah.
And I cannot recommend these two books highly enough. They are very well written. And one thing I've learned about our colleagues in Finland is that they are very serious about philosophy. And Dr. Niiles-Maki is going to talk about her work with the philosophy of Lauri Rauhala and logotherapy. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tom. Please tell me if you see this and you hear. Do you hear me?
I hear you just fine. Thank you. Yes.
And you see this?
I do not see it yet. Did you click on share screen?
Oh, okay. Just a minute.
Sure. Should be at the
Just a minute.
Yes.
Just a minute. There. Let's see. Do you see this?
It's coming. It's coming up. You have started screen sharing, and my connection may be a little slow. I'm not seeing any pictures yet. There, I see you again, and now I see your screen. Absolutely. Perfect.
Okay, that's good. I try to make
what we call presentation mode. There you go. Yep.
Now you see the full screen, don't you?
Not yet, but I think there's just a delay.
Can you see it now?
I see your full screen, but I don't. But I also see the slides are not taking up the entire screen, but it works just fine if you want to do it this way.
And I changed the slide, and you see it.
Yes.
Who is Laura? Okay. So we can start. I have made a PowerPoint presentation because it's easier to explain some difficult theories from Laura Rauhala with some PowerPoint describing of these theories. So my subject for this podcast is the connection between Laura Rauhala and logotherapy in the light of humanity and consciousness. And if you have anything to say or comment or ask, Tom, just interrupt me at any time, please.
I will. Absolutely.
Thanks. So who is Lauri Rauhala? Maybe Lauri Rauhala is not familiar with maybe English-speaking people. I don't know. But he's very famous still. and his holistic perspective theory of holistic perception of humanity is very famous all over the world. I think that it has been forgotten somehow, but still it has been very famous theory. So Lauri Rauhala, who died in 2016, sorry to say, he was a Finnish philosopher. He was also a psychologist and a psychoanalyst. And his area of expertise was particularly the holistic perception of humanity and his theory of human consciousness. So Lauri Rauhala was, as a philosopher, he was a phenomenologist. And his theories of being in the world and human consciousness, they both bring philosophical clarity to the theoretical basis of logotherapy. In particular, the concept of situationality. I don't know how to pronounce this. How should I pronounce this? Situationality or situationality or
Sure, you
how?
did it. That's fine. Situationality.
Situationality. Okay, thanks. The concept of situationality in the holistic perception of the humanity and his precision in describing the structure and function of consciousness, they both clarify the philosophical basis on which logotherapy is built. So first, we still have to, I think, take a step back to understand what's the difference between the human images and the perception of human, because there is a difference. Explanations of humanity in the scientific disciplines, all of the different scientific disciplines, for example, here biology, history, psychology, and medicine, they have always human images, since they tend to study, understand, and explain the human from the point of view of a given discipline, biology, history, and etc. And they exclude those dimensions that are not covered by the study of this particular discipline. And this is describing from the theory of regional ontology. So from this perspective, regional ontology's perspective, there can be perceptions of human in various scientific disciplines because of this. But the philosophical study, understanding, and explanation of the human constitutes a perception of the human as an entity being in the world. Mm-hmm. Then we can speak of the perception of human, not just human images. The philosophical perception of human, both from Viktor Frankl and Lauri Rauhala, they both have answered the philosophical question of the regional ontology quite consistently, I might say. And the question is, of course, how is a person in the world? This is the basic and most fundamental question of logotherapy. This question sets the ontological foundation on which philosophical anthropology is built. And only after this, it is meaningful to consider what is humanity and what makes a person a person.
Let me ask you a question. Everything you have said is very clear to me. I appreciate it. Are you changing the slides on your side?
Do you want to, where do I change?
I'm just asking because I'm still seeing the first slide. Have you changed it?
So do you see the slide, the human images and the perception of human?
No, I'm just seeing the original.
Yes. Okay, I did change the slide.
Okay.
But you don't see it.
I don't see it. So
you just see the cover.
That is correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm pulling up the slides on my computer now, and I am going to just tell me which slide that you are on. Is it?
Okay, maybe I stop sharing now
Yes. Okay. If
and
you
you
do that, I'll
start.
pull it up here.
Okay, that was good that you said that before I reached the final slide share, and I just have talked and talked. Nobody has seen anything.
Well, you're doing fine though. Let's see. Um, as I it, as I have said, I have to go in here and open my. So I'm doing this on my home computer, and it just updated, which means I have to go and change the settings again, even though I had all this set and ready to go. Um, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the pause button on our recording. Okay, after a brief technical upgrade, we are now ready to go with slides. Take it away.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So we are going to proceed. The first theory of Lauri Rauhala, his holistic perception of humanity. And this text is straight from my book. The translation is mine, and I quote Lauri Rauhala's text here because he says it the best. The basic forms of human existence are revealed in an ontological analysis. Its result is human perception. The whole of humanity can be understood with the help of three basic ontological forms. And these ontological forms of aspects of essence are first, corporeality. That means existence as an organic event. And the second aspect is consciousness. And that means existence as a psychic, spiritual, or noological experientiality. And the third aspect is situationality. And that means existence as a relatedness to one's own life situation. In the intertwining of aspects of an essence, the whole of a person is constituted. The whole is therefore not homogeneity, but rather a joint play of events and states of affairs, represented by the aspects of essence that are fundamentally and essentially different of each other. The holistic perception of humanity presented here is, to be more specific, it's monopluralistic because it reconciles plurality and unity. In empirical research and applications, the whole of human can therefore be managed only on the basis of acknowledging and taking into account the differences. So what Lauri Rauhala is saying, that a person is being in the world in these three basic ontological forms, or his their existence is constituted by these three aspects of essence: corporeality, consciousness, and situationality.
You know, and it remains, if you don't mind going back for just a second, the first two, corporeality and consciousness, make me think, of course, of our three typical dimensions we talk about as somatic, psychic, and noological, or physical, mental, and spiritual.
Yep.
I think, sorry, I don't have the book with me, but there was a Japanese logotherapist who wrote a couple of books on humanistic. I want to say his last name was Takamitsu, but I don't remember now. And he talked about a fourth dimension. And I think that situationality is this same concept that he was working on there, which I thought was a very good addition to our understanding of so because not only do we have who we are um, physically, mentally, spiritually, but we also have time and place, and so I just wanted to say kudos for bringing that into the discussion, because I think it's a very important aspect that perhaps we can overlook.
You're right. So, as you just said, Tom, the concepts of corporeality and consciousness, they are quite understandable aspects of the whole of person. But this concept of the situation, and that is the concept or the term that differs from Viktor Frankl's concept of physical, psychic, noological humanity. This is why the situation is so important. The situation, in Lauri Rauhala's redefined sense, it means everything outside a person in which they are intertwined. So, situationality as an aspect of a person's existence is the existence as relatedness to one's own life situation. And I have some examples. For example, right now, at this precise moment, I am related to this podcast because my life situation includes making this podcast and talking to you, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
But when the podcast is over and I continue my other work, this other work in hand, it belongs to my situation while I'm working. And I exist always in the situation, because even if the place and time and the content of my awareness too, even if they change, I'm always somewhere and in certain time. In other words, I'm always in some situation. So I'm always in the situation, but the components of the situation vary according to time and place. Situation itself is a constant aspect of the whole of a person.
Yes. I think you mentioned in your book, too, the Handbook for Logotherapists, the Cartesian dualism, how the Descartes, I think beforehand. But so really, in a lot of ways, this is how phenomenology sort of solves that problem.
Probably, yes. I was saying the same thing. Phenomenology solves this dualistic problem with this.
Yes.
Yeah. So this situationality is a very important aspect of a human essence. But it's not, the holistic perception is not enough. We need to study and understand the human consciousness in logotherapy. Why? And I try to explain why. Because for both Viktor Frankl and Rauhala, the noological, or like Rauhala says, personal spiritual, but I talk about noological dimension. The noological dimension is the dimension that makes person a person. The noological dimension is a structural property of the human consciousness, which is one of the three aspects of the whole of a person. So it's very important because it's one of the three aspects of the whole of a person. But the mere description and explanation of the ways of being in the world, they are not enough to provide answers to the question of what is humanity. And I mean by that, what makes a person a person? And to answer this, it requires the study and understanding and explanation of the human consciousness. It's also through research and understanding that we can find the ways of affecting the person in a conscious way. And by that, I mean treating the disorders of the human consciousness. So it's not enough. It's a good start, an important start to understand how a person is in the world. And he or she, a person is in the world in three different aspects of essence. And they all contain each other, they all need each other. So one can say that this subject is a person, or this object is a person. So there has to be all the three.
So, and
But
also the thought that you made me think about was in regarding, again, situationality, it makes me think of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, that you have the components of light, whether it's a, now I can't remember, but when it interacts with another object, such as time, something in time or space, it can alter, or I guess we're talking about particles, not light, but particles that can, position depends on its interaction with other things. I think I just totally made a mess of that whole situation. But um, when you talk about situationality, we're still those three components, but the change of the situation alters our being in the world. I guess I have a
yeah,
thought, but I don't know if I'm making sense, but uh, it did bring that uncertainty principle into my mind.
yeah, you're absolutely right. Because these three are there are the basic ontological forms of being in the world. But if you change one, it may change the others too.
Hmm.
But
You made
still,
sense out of
they
it.
are,
You
yeah.
made sense out of it. That's great.
Okay, good,
Thank
good. So we need to study and understand and explain human consciousness in order to understand what makes a person, and to understand how and why we can, or maybe we should affect a person in a conscious way. So I'm in therapy. So now I'm going to present uh, Laura Rauhala's theory of human consciousness. And this is somewhat a little difficult, so be patient. That's why I have color coded
you.
the certain important concepts. So it's I'm trying to simplify this difficult theory a little bit. Okay, consciousness is, as you know, one part of the whole of a person. And consciousness refers to the totality of human experience, which needs both corporeality and situationality in order to function as such a totality of experience. It needs corporeality, it needs uh, situationality. In consciousness, and note that consciousness is purple here.
Yes.
Consciousness, we can distinguish two or detect two main structures, the non-conscious and the conscious. The non-conscious here is red, and the conscious is dark blue. And the conscious consists of two basic qualities, and they are awareness and unconscious, and they are light blue.
Yes.
So purple consciousness is formed by the reciprocal process of these.
Can you explain just a little bit? Oh, I guess you probably are in this slide. Uh,
Yeah,
I was,
I'm trying to explain
here
them
we go.
now. Okay. So non-conscious means all such physical organic activity that's not experiential and from which you cannot form any context of meaning. But it's still very essential as a platform of the activity of the conscious. So conscious means all such physical organic activity that is experiential and from which you can form context of meaning. Unconscious and the awareness of the conscious are extremities of each other in consciousness. According to Laura Rauhala, this this means more about the variation in the degree of clarity of meanings than about really two separate parts of consciousness. It's not about, there are no two separate parts of conscious. There are no unconscious is here and awareness is there, but it's really about it's about their the clarity in consciousness.
It's a continuum.
Yeah, yeah. Consciousness works on the consciousness, awareness, and conscious axis in such a way that it can be seen as the occurrence or non-occurrence of meanings in one's worldview. So it's a continuous occurrence or non-occurrence. A cycle, continuous cycle of occurrences or non-occurrences. So to sum up, consciousness is a reciprocal and continuous process of consciousness, aware and unconscious action, where the non-conscious acts as a platform for the consciousness process. And now I have this picture, I have this diagram of Lauri Rauhala's consciousness, and you can see the colors that are the same as in the text. The reframing color is, of course, purple, because all of this inside the purple is consciousness. You see non-conscious on the bottom, because it's the platform. So that's why it's in the bottom. Non-conscious is this physical organic activity of human, and it's the platform of the activity of the whole consciousness. And there you can see the conscious, psychic conscious, the personal spiritual conscious, the objective spirit, and the objectified spirit. First, I will explain this yellow arrow and these light blue arrows.
Okay.
This yellow arrow means causation. It means that non-conscious and the psychic conscious or the conscious is in a mutual causation with each other through behavior. So non-conscious affects the psychic conscious, and the psychic conscious affects the non-conscious. So it's like saying that psychic dimension can affect the somatic level of a person, and the somatic functioning of a person can affect the psychic dimension in logotherapy, in Frankl's terms. Yeah. You can see that there are these light blue arrows. They mean the awareness, unconscious, continuing cycle of occurrence and non-occurrence. In Lauri Rauhala's theory, there are differences, qualitative differences in personal between personal spiritual conscious and the psychic conscious. The personal spiritual conscious is much like a noological dimension, because it is qualitatively very different from the psychic conscious. The psychic conscious is related to it's not related to the situation, but it's interpersonal, related to interpersonal activity and intrapersonal activity. So it doesn't reach outside of itself.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And the personal spiritual conscious is related. It's always connected to the situation, of course. It's connected to the situation. So it reaches out of itself. So this is the main, I think, in my account, this is the main difference between psychic conscious and personal spiritual conscious. But it has many of the differences, qualitatively differences. But you can see that uh, uh, these are green. You can see that there are three different grades there describing the personal spiritual conscious. And you can see the dark green arrows going from the personal spiritual conscious to the objective spirit and the objectified spirit. And I have to, this is so hard to explain, but I think I have to quote my own book to explain what these are.
Yes.
So that you understand what these are. According to Lauri Rauhala, the objective spirit here, the above, is realized in cultural phenomena, such as various institutions, fashion, science and art, values and customs, and the legal system, and it functions relatively independently of the personal spiritual. The objective spirit is realized in cultural phenomena. Just like I'm a teacher too, so I think that school is a very good example of this institute that is a product of the objective spirit.
Okay.
So the personal spirit creates products like the institutions,
right,
or art or culture. And the light green arrow means that these institutes, of course, they can be departed from this personal spiritual conscious over time, because they move on to be a part of a collective society.
Yes. So you say that the objective spirit in some way is like archetypes in Jungian psychology, or that's completely off base?
Yeah. It's not one. If one personal spiritual conscious can create something or be part of creating something,
yes.
But once it's created, it's not a part of me anymore.
Right.
Or one's own personal spiritual conscious. It's part of a collective society. It's an institution. It's a science, part of science world. The objective spirit, as opposed to the personal spiritual conscious, is impersonal. So it has no conscience and therefore no conscience or responsibility. So if we think about, for example, schools as institutes, school doesn't have responsibility itself. School doesn't have conscience itself. The person who work in the school, hopefully they have responsibility and they have conscience. But the school itself, the institute itself, doesn't have any conscience or responsibility or values. It's a product of the creation mind of the personal spiritual conscious. But in time, nobody even remembers who was the first person who wanted to create something like this. Okay, let's move on to the objectified spirit.
Yes.
The objectified spirit includes those products of science and art that have human cultural permanence. So those are products of science and art. For example, scientific theories. This objectified spirit stabilizes and it preserves culture. And even though the personal spiritual is the creator of these products or for these objects, and it's crucially important for creating these products or objects or theories or anything. But still, when they come out, when they are created, like theories, scientific theories, when they are created, when someone creates them and they are created, they become, once they are presented, they become part of the scientific field. And in time, nobody remembers who created what theory. There can be opinions, but it's not that simple. Maybe one, maybe a decade or two or three or four, uh, it can be remembered, but over time it vanishes. But in in case of the objectified spirit, the creator, the personal spiritual conscious, is very important. But in time, they both can be and will be departed from the personal spiritual conscious. So this is something that is not in Viktor Frankl's theories, or I haven't seen in any theories about consciousness these triplet of personal spiritual conscious. This is, I think, it's very intriguing. In my account, it's very intriguing.
Yes. As I'm looking over this, and I'm remembering, of course, I read your book, and I keep telling myself I need to read it again. But there's a lot about what you have presented here in this diagram that I feel like it makes a lot of sense, even though I haven't fully grasped it. So I need to keep working through it. But I do, to begin with, though, it's always been an interesting question for me about the difference between the psychic conscious and the spiritual conscious, because a lot of reasons. One is because sometimes you don't know where one ends and the other begins. And secondly, our vocabulary is kind of messed up in the sense that we talk about psyche. In English, we say psyche. I think the word is psyche in Greek or maybe in German, but which means soul. If you read Greek, psyche means soul. But in logotherapy, we use it as a little bit lower because we use nous or nous, the noological to refer to the higher spirit. So, and in German, Geist, does that mean mind or does that mean spirit? You know, so geistlich versus geistig and so forth. It's really confusing simply because I think maybe we're trying to separate something that is not really truly separated. So when you talk about Raula's approach here, it's like very compatible, and yet he seems to be explaining something that we don't necessarily get in logotherapy. And I don't think I have completely grasped it, but it has the ring of truth, or has the ring of, it sounds good, it sounds meaningful. And I just have to keep working through this. I do have another question about objective spirit versus objectified spirit. I don't know if I've understood this correctly. So I'm going to give you an analogy, and you can tell me I'm right or I'm wrong or somewhere in between. Okay. So objective spirit, let's say painting. Painting is perhaps an example. If so, then maybe objectified spirit would be the Mona Lisa. So is that off base, or is that kind of kind of correct?
I have to think about it. If I make, you mean a specific painting?
Yeah, that's what I was, maybe I have not understood the concept correctly, but I was thinking in terms of objective spirit, meaning you said a theory or a, some kind of art or some kind of science, and then objectified spirit, maybe I haven't truly grasped that, because I was thinking that would be a very concrete example. It's like one is more like theory and one is more like actual, I don't know. That's what I was thinking, but maybe I'm just not fully grasping the concept here.
When,
It's quite all right. You can tell me I'm totally wrong.
no, you're not totally wrong. I'm just thinking about what do you mean by Mona Lisa? Do you mean the institute, the institutionalized Mona Lisa? Because she's an institution. Uh, she's she's part of our cultural heritage, the Mona Lisa. Or do you mean the object, the painting of Mona Lisa?
Hmm.
Because this is the difference.
Great question. Probably I mean the object, but mm,
If you are saying that Mona Lisa is something bigger than a painting, it has become the part of our cultural heritage, and it belongs to everyone. Then you are right. And someone paints Mona Lisa, someone paints a painting and from Mona Lisa, about Mona Lisa, and calls it Mona Lisa. And once it's presented, and once the society makes it its own, it it becomes the objective, the objective spirit.
okay.
I'm sorry, objectified spirit.
Okay.
So it becomes something that belongs to everyone, not just the person who created it.
Hmm.
And the objective spirit is something that is is part of something bigger, functioning element in society. For example, institutes, for example, school. So it has a difference. But the main thing here is to understand that both of them uh, will not be part of the personal spiritual conscious after a while. So it takes time, and they live in society. They are part of everyone. They're part of everyone's culture,
Hmm.
and they belong to everyone. But someone has been a part of create. Someone has been a participant or made or solely made these things, but they're not yours anymore. I may create a theory and I present them in academic field. And once it's presented, it's and it has been uh, accepted. It has been accepted. So it becomes part of the scientific field. It's not mine anymore. It's everyone's. And
Right.
everyone can use it the way they choose. And I don't have anything to say it. I can't say anything. They can do whatever they want with it and misunderstand it if they want to. But
Sure.
you understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think if you see the background behind me, I have taken the uh, dimensional ontology and Americanized it a little bit with baseball, an ice cream cone, and a soda can.
Yeah. And this is a perfect example of the objectified spirit, your background. Uh, Now, the question of the difference between the psychic conscious and the personal spiritual conscious. Lauri Rauhala states that they are different. They really are different.
Mhm.
Because they are qualitatively different. They are related to different uh, parts of the world, I may say, because psychic conscious is it's not connected to outside of itself. It's connected to intra and interpersonal world. So it's connected to itself, and it's related to communication, but nothing else. And it has its own components and its own operating principles. And the personal spiritual is connected to the situation, and it reaches out of itself, and it has its own operating principles and own contents of meaning and its own context of meaning. So Laura Rauhala says that they are different. They are qualitative. Really, they are different. But the problem is not this. It's coming. The next slide. I don't. Okay, there. So if we go forward, so this raises question of what does this theory give to logotheoretical understanding of the person? This is a quite important question. We understand, every logotherapist or researcher should understand that we need to study, understand, and explain the structure and function of the human consciousness in order to understand the place and functioning of the noological dimension of consciousness. If Frankl writes about the noological dimension of consciousness, we really have to understand what does it mean? Because noological dimension of consciousness is the other and very important part of the whole consciousness. And it differs from the psychic dimension of consciousness on behalf of its quality and agents. And of course, I know that we talk about psychic dimension and its origin. This word's origin comes from Greek, psyche, and it means soul and mind. But and Frankl knew too. But if the psyche is already taken, so he had to somehow make the difference between the psychological psychological, what is it? Content, psychological content of the mind, and the content in the mind that's not psychological. That's not part of this psychological operationing, what's in our mind. He had to make the difference. So he started first using the geistic, which means spiritual, and then from spiritual to noological, because it's connotation.
Yes.
Both Viktor Frankl and Lauri Rauhala used philosophical methods to justify the existence of the noological dimension. So they used philosophy to make the difference and to justify the difference.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And Frankl's reasoning was more practically oriented. He described the functioning of the noological dimension through philosophical theorizing. So he was a practical man, and he described the functioning in practice. But Lauri Rauhala consistently took phenomenological reasoning further towards precise end result, and that precise end result is a phenomenological hermeneutic total theory of consciousness. So what Frankl was missing was this precise description of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But still, if we go forward, in my account, they both are missing something. If we think about logotherapy and logophilosophy, something is still missing in both of them. We take Frankl first. In his books, Frankl did not accurately describe, or he didn't make detailed distinctions between the field of the psychic and the noological dimensions in consciousness, because he was not that interested in studying consciousness from a philosophical point of view. That was not his speciality. He focused more on justifying the understanding and explanation of the different dimensions of the human being and justifying the medical benefit of logotherapy in the treatment of mental problems. This was his expertise, field of expertise. Okay, Lauri Rauhala, on the other hand. Wow. Why this comes? Lauri Rauhala, on the other hand, he didn't distinguish between unfavorable experiences of the psychic dimension of consciousness and the personal spiritual, which means noological dimension of consciousness. He didn't distinguish the unfavorable experiences between these two because, and this is important and interesting, because according to him, both dimensions function in the process of constructing a worldview. Rauhala criticized the understanding of the disciplines of psychiatry and psychology, both psychiatry and psychology, about how the disorders in consciousness are qualitatively seen, and especially how they are studied and understood. And really he criticized. However, still, Rauhala remained in the psychoanalytic framework, and he combined the disorders of the psychic and the spiritual, that means noological dimensions. And he combined the disorders as a function of the distortion process of context of meaning within the worldview. So first he separated the psychic and the personal spirit, and then he just combined it because he was sure that psychoanalysis was the right treatment for these distortions of constructing the worldview.
Mm-hmm.
So this is so interesting to me.
Yeah, and it reminds me of an argument. I don't remember if this comes from Freud or from people who deal with Freud, but the question is whether psychoanalysis is a science or not. And yeah.
I know this dispute because Lauri Rauhala has joined this dispute too. And I read this article about what he wrote about this. And he wrote that psychoanalysis is not a science, but it's a method that uses scientific principles. Because its basis lies in science. Like logotherapy, its basis lies in philosophy.
Yes.
And psychoanalysis has the basis in medicine. So, comme ci, comme ça.
Yeah, right.
What can I say? Psychoanalysis from Lauri Rauhala and from my opinion, it's not a science. But it uses scientific principles like any other treatment, like any other therapy form.
There has to be an art to it as well. And in many ways, we can say this works. I don't necessarily understand completely how it works or cannot always explain how it works, but it works.
What works? I'm sorry.
Well, logotherapy works. Paradoxical intent works.
Yeah, yeah,
Excuse me.
yeah. It works. Yes. So every therapy is based on some scientific basis, or it's not therapy. It's something else. Shouldn't be called therapy form. So psychoanalysis is based on medicine, psychiatry. It's based on psychiatry, but it's not science. Like logotherapy,
Mhm.
it's based on academic philosophy, which is science, and it it uses the scientific methods,
Mhm.
and it's based on research, and it works. Like psychoanalysis works in some cases, and in some people, and in some circumstances.
Mhm.
According to logotherapy, as well as Laura Rauhala, disorders of the psychic and the noological, and I have to say that noological is a logotherapeutic term. Laura Rauhala uses personal spiritual, but they are almost the same. Disorders of the psychic and the noological dimension are disturbances at different levels of the human worldview. So this is an overall explanation. But although, according to Rauhala, these disorders are significant only to what kind of context or meaning they create in the context of understanding. And thus, what kind of distorted or not distorted worldview does a person generate through these unfavorable or negative interpretations? So, my question is, wouldn't it then be essential to also understand and study how do these different levels of disturbances distort our worldview in different ways?
Yes.
Because it's been admitted that psychic dimension and neurological dimension, they are of different quality, and they are related to different things in the world. So why how we can say that okay, we combine them and treat them the same way? The problems that arise from neurological dimension and the problems that arise in psychic dimension, they, how can we say that if they are different quality and they rise from different dimensions, they're ontologically different, how can we say that they can be treated just the same way? That is my question. And still more questions. What kind of distortions arise in the psychic dimension of consciousness and in the neurological dimension of consciousness? What kind of distortions? And why are the distortions of different quality? And what are the effects of the different quality in generating a person's worldview? And I claim that the effects are quite different, quite different.
I think this would be a great time to mention that people who do not accept the concept of a noological dimension or a personal spiritual uh, dimension will be distorted in how they respond to noological problems or distorted crises, right? So, to me, one of the biggest problems I see here in this country is somebody is depressed. They don't have a physical cause, they don't have a psychological cause, but a doctor wants to give them an antidepressant.
Mhm.
And when that doesn't work, they just give them more antidepressants. And one of the really bad things that we have here in the United States is that pharmaceutical companies actually advertise on television, which is terrible. And
Yeah.
now they advertise not just antidepressants, but medicines to help your antidepressant work better. And in the small print and the disclaimer at the bottom, you know, may cause suicidal thoughts, may cause your liver to fail, it may, all these terrible things are happening. And I'm like, just let me be depressed, But obviously, we don't recognize a personal spiritual or a noological dimension. We can do a lot of harm to a person.
Yeah, really, the situation is same here in Finland and in many, many countries. And I don't know how many years to come I have to fight and make more research and hope that more researchers, scientists make more research all the time that we can justify this. We have justified it in many ways, and Viktor Frankl has justified it, but somehow it just I think it's because of the era of psychology, the era of meanings. I have talked about the difference of purposes and meanings, and we live in the era of psychology, and we live in the era of meanings, and live in the era of me. We live in the era that everything is about me and what is important to me and what do I feel right now and what does it affect my behavior and my what is important to me. But in logotherapy, it's all about purposes. It's not about meanings. The purpose is something you found from outside of yourself. And it's not about yourself. But in psychology, it is about yourself. And when something it's concerned with you, it is about yourself or it's about me. I think it's appealing when I'm talking about myself and what's important to me. It's very appealing for me, and it's I think it's very dangerous because people here in Finland and in all over Western world, I should say Western world, I think people are somehow within themselves. They don't see the problems outside of themselves.
Right.
And they are too hyper reflective,
Yes. Yeah. Right.
And that's really bad for all the people and for all the world, for nature and everything, for the physics that's surrounding us, and we are part of it. It's really dangerous and harmful, as you said, very harmful. So we have to acknowledge the difference, the ontological difference between the noological dimension and the psychic dimension. And because the disorders of different dimensions are of different quality already on behalf of the contents of meaning, we have to start from the operating principles that generate the contents of meaning in the noological dimension of consciousness. It's very important that we as logotherapists and people who do logotherapeutic research, that we understand how the noological dimension works and what kind of principles, according to what principles it functions. It's very important that we understand it. So we have to start from the only and basic operating principles, which I call the agents. And Tom, do you remember what the agents are, the two agents of the noological dimension?
I had better not say anything because I'm going to feel really dumb right now.
They are, of course, these operating principles that generate the qualities or properties. They are self-distancing and self-transcendence, of course. And through these agents, it's possible to find out how the contents of meaning in the noological dimension of human consciousness, how the contents of meaning differ from the contents of meaning in the psychic dimension of human consciousness. I always say to the students of logotherapy or any other students of mine, I always say that if you're uncertain about something, you have to go backwards. You have to go to the start, to origin, to the etiology of things, to the ontological etiology. So from there, you can conduct the things, the issues, but you have to go back. Always you have to go back if you are not certain about something. And here too, we can talk about what is noological dimension, and it functions well, and of course it has these things. But if we don't really understand how it functions and what is the structure, so it's in somehow vague in vague foundation, like if the house is built in very vague foundation, it collapses.
Right.
When someone just comes, it just can collapse. But if we go to the basic, to the foundations, and from there to conduct from these premises, we make conclusions, and we are certain every step of the way that we know that this thing is fact, then we can be certain. But this is the only way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
There are no shortcuts.
That's right.
And that's why we need more detailed description about the structure and functioning of the human consciousness in order to understand its disorders and their basis. So logotherapist needs he needs the knowledge about the functioning and structure of the psychic dimension, and of course the functioning and the structure of the noological dimension, because when we talk about disorders of the noological dimension, we come to that a little bit later. When we talk about them, we have to know when it's about the something is that something is wrong in the neurological dimension and not in the psychic dimension. We have to be able to separate the disorders so that we can treat the disorders in the neurological dimension in the right way. This is why psychiatric and psychological descriptions are not enough, because they ignore the other important part of the consciousness. And that is the part of the consciousness what belongs to the field of logotherapy. And that is, of course, not the neurological dimension. And due to its particular qualities and agents, and the agents were self-transcendence and come on. Yes. And properties or qualities are will to purpose and faith and conscience and the divine power of spirit. And through these, we can understand the neurological dimension, and it can be relevantly studied and understood and explained. And we only can explain and understand and study neurological dimension in its own ontological region. Just like the psychic dimension cannot be relevantly studied or understood and explained outside its region of psychiatry and psychology. If we try to study or understand or explain the psychic dimension, the function and the structure of psychic dimension through a philosophical field, we are bound to bump into serious problems. Mm-hmm. it doesn't, we don't succeed because we are dealing with these things wrongly, with the wrong ontological region. We have to understand that every therapy form and every issue has its own ontological region. And that is the region in which we have to, we can understand this phenomena. So, what then is the relevant ontological region of studying, understanding, and explaining the functioning of the noological dimension? And you know, Tom, as well as I do, and as well as Frankl, of course, because he expressed it very clearly, and it's philosophy. We know it, and Frankl knew it. And here are some uh, uh, books and pages where you can find the justification of philosophical theorizing in studying and understanding and explaining the functioning of the noological dimension. With the help of philosophical research, we can reveal the ontological difference between the psychic and the noological dimensions of the human consciousness, and we can detect the distortions that arise in the noological dimension. I speak of distortions, and there is a reason why I do that. Logotherapist's job is not to detect or treat the disorders that arise in the psychic dimension. For these disorders have different etiologies than the distortions in noological dimension, which of them are always connected to experiencing purposes in one's life. So every problem that arises in the noological dimension is somehow related to experiencing purposes. And the problems that arise in psychic dimension are not related to experiencing purposes, but numerous other things, but not to experiencing purposes. Logotherapy, of course, can still be useful in treating psychic disorders, but you have to remember that it can be the only form of treatment.
Yes. And I think in his manual, Frankl said that in such cases, it's a secondary form of treatment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's something that has to be clear to a logotherapist. Because anyone can benefit from logotherapeutic exercises, anyone, as long as their noological dimension is awakened. So if my noological dimension is not awakened, why I cannot benefit from logotherapeutic exercises? Why cannot I'm asking you, Tom, if I go to logotherapist for help, and logotherapist acknowledges that, in fact, my noological dimension hasn't been awakened.
Yes.
So can he or she help me? Can he or she treat me?
Right. That is a really, really difficult question to answer, for sure. Because my understanding is that, if a person does not raise the spiritual in their description of their problem, especially from a religious point of view, to bringing in is problematic. And the only exception I would make to that would be that as a minister, if someone comes to me with a problem, my first assumption is that they're coming to me not necessarily as a logotherapist, but as a pastoral counselor, and that there would be some spiritual angle that they were looking for, as opposed to going to a logotherapist in a counseling center and saying, I don't know why I can't sleep at night or whatever. I'm sure that's a very complicated problem. And I agree with you that if their noological dimension is not awakened, what good is logotherapy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So logotherapy can only help those people whose noological dimension is awakened. And logophilosophy is the field that awakens and activates, uses many ways of activating or awakening the noological dimension of consciousness. So there's a difference between logophilosophy and logotherapy. Logotherapy is a therapy form, is therapy. And it can help if you don't have the noological dimension. Of course you have as a possibility, but it's still sleeping. But if it is sleeping, it's not activated, it's not awakened. There's nothing logotherapist can do really, or she can do a lot, but it's not useful for the client. But logophilasophy is useful at any times, always. It's useful because it really is about activating your noological dimension.
So let
This
me
is the
see if I can.
difference between.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I was going to say, so let's say a client comes to you for a therapy and it's clear to you that their noological dimension is not awakened. So what you're saying is you're not going to try logotherapy, but you might explain to them the philosophy behind logotherapy, the logo philosophy as a way of bringing them to a point of awakening their noological dimension?
No.
Okay.
My job as a logotherapist is not to treat people whose neurological dimension is not awakened, and it's logotherapy. It's not when I'm a logotherapist, I'm not at that moment in therapy. I'm not a logophilosopher. But here with you, I'm both a logotherapist and a logophilosopher.
Okay.
But with the client, I'm not.
Yes.
So I'm not I won't even try to explain what logophilosophy is and what the noological dimension is, because it's no use.
I see.
And the client needs help, that's for sure, because he or she has applied therapy.
Yes.
He or she, the person needs help, the client needs help.
Sure.
So it's my responsibility to try to find the proper help for the client, trying to guide the client to seek the proper help.
Yes. And it
And
seems
that's
to me
all
like
I
a lot
can
of no,
do.
sorry.
Yes.
It seems like a lot of logotherapists I know do not limit themselves to logotherapy. I think it seems like a lot of them have other techniques at their disposal.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, if they have studied as a psychotherapist too, that's fine, because they can use multiple techniques. But
Yes.
if you have studied as a logotherapist, if you haven't studied as a psychiatrist or psychologist, or you haven't studied psychology at all, I don't see how you can use psychotherapeutic methods.
Right. Yes.
And I don't see, if you haven't studied logotherapy,
Mhm.
I don't see how you can use logotherapeutic methods. So you have to study
Mhm.
the field
Yes.
in order to use it. You have to have your theory understood before you can move on to practice.
Yes. I agree. Absolutely. And see, even in my case, I don't even do logotherapy per se. I do pastoral counseling, I do teaching, I do preaching, but a lot of what I do is more like psychological hygiene, perhaps than
Mm.
therapy. So, or triage,
For
maybe I
myself,
should say.
for example, sorry.
It's okay.
Uh,
I stopped and then I started again. So Sorry.
Okay, so if I speak for myself, I have studied psychology and I'm a psychology teacher too. I'm a theology teacher and I'm teaching philosophy and psychology too. So I have studied psychology in university, but I'm not a psychotherapist and I'm not psychologist. I just have studied psychology
Mhm.
in order to understand, in order to teach it.
Mhm.
But I'm not saying that I am a psychotherapist because or psychologist for my studying. But I know that there are people who haven't even studied psychology, and they call themselves psychologists or or other professional terms. I know, and that is really a problem
Absolutely.
in this in a therapy field. So you have to have studied, you have to have a degree in so that you can say that you are a logotherapist or psychotherapist. I can say that I'm a logotherapist,
Mhm.
but I can't say I'm a psychotherapist. It's not my job to detect or treat the disorders that arise in psychic dimension. I haven't studied that,
Mm.
but I have studied how to treat the disorders that arise in noological dimension.
Yes.
So I have spoken about disorders that arise in noological dimension, but that raises, of course, a question: how can there be distortions in a healthy dimension? Because, according to Viktor Frankl, noological dimension cannot get ill, and that is true because only physical and psychic dimensions can get ill,
Mhm.
according to Viktor Frankl, and that's true. And we must remember that illness is always related to a person's somatic level.
Yes. Mhm.
And I have a small print here, a remark
Mhm.
that only those psychic disturbances that have a clear biological cause can be called mental illnesses.
Ah,
And nowadays, based on nowadays research, only long-term psychosis and schizophrenia are those disorders that can be called mental illnesses because it's proven that they have clear biological cause,
right.
and the rest should be called mental disorders.
Hmm.
So we have distortions in the neurological dimension. We have mental disorders in the psychic dimension, and we have mental illnesses that are both in biological level and in psychic dimension. Their origin is in both
Hmm.
there. And the psychic dimension of consciousness and the somatic level of a person, they have a mutual causation through behavior,
Hmm.
and they have downward. Uh, the psychic dimension has downward causation from
Hmm.
the psychic to somatic. If you remember the ontological emergence theory
Yes. Hmm.
about
Yeah.
this. Okay. So the neurological dimension has only downward causation to the psychic and only to the psychic to the somatic level. So from up to bottom. Since the functioning of the psychic doesn't cause changes in the neurological dimension, but the functioning of the neurological can cause changes in the psychic dimension. And I have some examples. Uh, for example, if a person has lost their purpose, the behavior and emotional reactions may also change. But if a person is suffering from a mental disorder, they still have the healthy ability to use their agents in the neurological dimension.
Hmm.
Like Frankl said, I don't remember exact words, but he said that 5 plus 5 is 10, even if
Schizophrenic tells you that.
schizophrenic says it, yes.
Yes.
And it means just the same thing.
Yes.
And this, what I said, applies only if someone's neurological dimension is awakened, of course.
Yes. This was a big
And
part of my really appreciating Frankl and Der unbewusste Gott, or the man's search for ultimate meaning, is that even because of psychosis or psychotic problems, does not prevent somebody from having a healthy, vigorous spiritual dimension. And so, yeah, this is good stuff to me.
Yeah, because if you have some sort of mental illness or mental disorder, there's nothing stopping you from functioning in the neurological, healthy functioning, for your healthy functioning in neurological dimension. And that is something that's very important. You can study for being a logotherapist even though you may have some psychological disorder. A person can suffer from a distortion with experiencing a purpose, even when their agents function in a healthy way. And this is important. This is because the problem lies in the conflict between functioning of either of the agents and the situation. And now we bring the concept, Lauri Rauhala's concept of the situation to logotherapy.
Yes, yes, nice.
And the problem that arises from in the neurological dimension, they are always related to purposes, experiencing purposes. And we know that the purposes are something that we find from outside of ourselves in the situation. So it's clear that the problem lies experiencing the purposes. It has to lie in the conflict between functioning of either of the agents and the situation. And this conflict state of being, this causes suffering, and it can manifest in many levels in a person's life, behavior, emotional reactions, and so on. And the only effective way treating the distortions with experiencing a purpose is through logotherapy. There is no other effective way. And about these distortions, I think that they are the subject of our fifth. Am I not? Am I right? Our fifth podcast.
Well, this is our third one. So, do you mean the next one or the one after that one?
The one after that, because the next one is focused on the logotheric theory of consciousness, which differs from Lauri Rauhala's theory. So this is bringing something from Lauri Rauhala's theory and combining it to Viktor Frankl's concept of the consciousness, and that is the logotheric theory of consciousness. And this is next time. But these distortions and the categorization of these distortions and the field of therapies, they are, I think, the subject of the last podcast. So I'm not now at the end of my slideshow, and here are the sources in which I have some references.
Excellent.
So I know that it took a lot of time. This took a lot of time, but still, do you have some comments or questions that rise now?
Well, first of all, I want to say that this was excellent, and it was hard. It was difficult, and so I say that I want to say several very nice things about your presentation. First of all, to those who are watching, they should just be amazed that you have taken some very complicated material and you've explained it very well. And I also like the fact that, you know, you don't soft, in English, we might say you don't soft pedal it, or you don't try to, you know, make it easy. You know, there are people who write books called Philosophy Made Easy. I think that those books should never be published because philosophy is not easy and it shouldn't be. And people who want to make it easy are lazy and they don't, you know. So you haven't tried to water it down or make, but you have made it understandable. And you've done this in English, which I greatly appreciate, which I think is your fourth language. So that in itself is praiseworthy, and I really appreciate that. I think that I will go back and watch this interview several times, as I will also promise to go back and reread Handbook for a Logotherapist, which you have listed here. And I want to encourage people who are watching to go to your website and to order the book from you. It's a bargain at $10, or I don't remember what the price was, but somewhere it's a bargain. Whatever the price is, if it's $100, it's still a bargain. So and you have, as I said at the beginning of this recording, you guys are very serious about philosophy in Finland. And so I really appreciate that. And I accept the challenge to understand this better, logotherapy better from a philosophical basis, to try and understand Rahula. Anyway, I never get that right. But to understand his work better. And so I think what you are doing is a real service to our field, and I appreciate it. I don't think I have any more questions at this time.
Thank you, Tom, for those kind words. I I try to make these theories understandable, but as you said, they are difficult.
Yes.
And there's no shortcut. There are no shortcuts. I can't make them any simpler. And I can't smoothen them because they just have to understand and just have to study these things to understand.
That's correct.
So that's philosophy. That's philosophy.
Absolutely.
I think I stopped sharing.
Okay.
Because you don't have
There
any
we go.
questions. And I'd like to thank you very much for this interview. It's been great to be here again. And I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yes, me too. The next two, right? Numbers 4 and 5.
Yeah,
and
numbers 4 and 5.
I'll just go ahead. Let me go ahead and stop this, and I will talk with you briefly afterwards. But again, thank you for sharing so much intellectual content with us. And it's a real privilege to have this conversation.
Thank you.
Very welcome.